In the far corner of the Orion Spur, where stars hung like cold lanterns in endless dark, the once beautiful world of Telisar trembled beneath the shadow of destruction. The Valari, a gentle alien race with long, shimmering forms and glowing eyes, were not made for war. Their cities floated above crystal lakes powered by harmony and art, not violence. For thousands of years they believed in peace. But now, peace had turned against them. The skies above their home burned red as the Karnak swarm descended. Creatures, part machine, part beast, and fully merciless. Towering hives landed like falling mountains, spreading sickness and chaos wherever they touched. The Valari had never faced an enemy like this. They had no weapons strong enough, no fleets fast enough. They had only one option left. They sent a signal. The message was built with care, encoded in every language known to the galaxy. It was not a call to arms, it was a cry for help. A desperate voice sent across space, reaching out like a whisper in a storm. The Valari didn't expect an answer. Their neighbors had heard and done nothing. The great empires feared the Karnaks. Even the Council of Stars had turned its face away, choosing survival over honor. Hope faded like their sun. But far away, light years, beyond the reach of the swarm, a lone human ship drifted through the black. The Omen's wake was a sleek exploration cruiser, watching deep space for signs of life. Its AI, a sharp and curious system named Gray 7, caught the signal as it passed through the outer edges of an asteroid field. It paused, analyzed, listened, and then it understood. Within moments, the human crew was awake, moving quickly. Captain Arlen Voss, a quiet man with steel-gray eyes, watched the decoded message replay on the screen. The Valari voice trembled. Their cities were falling, their children were hiding underground. The swarm was growing. There was no one left to stop it. Captain Voss didn't speak right away. He just looked at the stars and nodded once. The crew sent the message back to Earth through hyperspace relays. And Earth, scarred by centuries of conflict, hardened by survival on one of the galaxy's deadliest worlds, listened. The Unified Defense Network held a meeting within the hour. Leaders, admirals, scientists, and war-hardened strategists gathered in one place. They watched the signal. They watched it again, and no one turned away. The decision came not with argument but with understanding. Humanity had never been welcomed into the galactic fold. Other species called Earth a death world, too dangerous, too chaotic. But when others ran, humans stood. When peace failed, humans adapted. And now, someone needed them. Orders were given. Engines roared. The first Terran expeditionary fleet was pulled from its deep space stations and supply worlds. Ships with names like Iron Dawn, Hammerfall, and Starlance lit up the dark. Thousands of soldiers, engineers, medics, and volunteers prepared to travel to a world they had never seen, to protect a people they had never met. Not for glory, not for power, but because someone had asked. Back aboard the Omen's wake, Captain Voss stood by the viewing window as the stars stretched and twisted with the jump to hyperspace. Gray 7 spoke through the intercom, its voice calm but focused. Destination locked, estimated arrival at Telisar, 4 days. Let's hope we're not too late, Voss replied quietly. And in those quiet days across the galaxy, a rumor began to spread. A signal had been heard. A response had been sent. The humans were coming. The Deathworlders, the Unbreakables. The ones who survived everything. And as the Karnaks continued their harvest on Telisar, as the skies grew darker and the Valari's last defenses weakened, something ancient stirred in the dark. Not a god, not a weapon, but a fleet. A fleet born from fire and forged in storms. A fleet that would not ask permission or seek applause. A fleet that would teach the galaxy what it meant to stand and fight. Humanity was on its way, and the stars would never forget it. The skies above Telisar cracked open like glass as space itself seemed to bend. A thunder of silence rolled across the heavens before light burst through the clouds, sharp, white, and vast. The first Terran. Expeditionary fleet arrived not with celebration, but with presence. Dozens of enormous ships, dark, armored, and unshaken by the void, dropped from hyperspace like falling stars. Their hulls reflected nothing, like shadows carved from the night itself. The Valari, watching from broken towers and shattered observatories, stood frozen in awe. For generations, stories had warned them of the Deathworlders, beings born from fire raised in storms and shaped by a planet that killed the weak and sharpened the strong. But now those stories came to life, as the humans emerged from the silence of space not as monsters but as warriors. At the center of the command formation, the Terran flagship Resolute Honor loomed like a mountain of metal. On its bridge, Admiral Rhea Voss stood calm, her uniform a mirror of order, her eyes sharp and clear. She studied the scans of Telisar, saw the red scars where the Karnax had landed, and the flickering signs of Valari life hidden in crumbling cities. A single message was sent, carried in every Valari tongue. We don't run, we stand. It was not poetry. It was a promise. Within hours, human dropships cut through the skies. Their descent left trails of blue flame, streaking past the clouds, like falling daggers. On board, human marines checked gear, secured armor, and readied their minds for what waited below. These were not ordinary soldiers. Many of them had trained on Earth's harshest lands, volcanic zones, radioactive ruins, endless frozen wastes. Some had fought off entire colonies of predators to earn their place. Some had lost more than names in battle. But now, united under the Terran flag, they came not for conquest but for protection. As they landed on the surface of Telisar, the air itself seemed to grow still. The Valari had never seen humans up close. These warriors were taller, heavier, built for survival. Their armor gleamed in the fading light, not with beauty, but with purpose. Helmeted faces stared out through glowing visors. Their weapons, sleek but terrifying, were built not only to kill, but to win. As they moved through ruined Valari streets, they found survivors hiding in fear. The human medics gave food, water, and medicine with careful hands while scouts mapped the roads ahead. The Valari did not understand the words, but they understood the meaning. The humans had come to hold the line. Far beyond the cities, the Karnax felt the shift. Their hive mind pulsed with warning. Something new had arrived, something outside their calculations. They had devoured planets, crushed fleets, and torn empires apart. But never had they faced a species that did not fear extinction. Human forces began hitting the Karnax hard. Drones were taken down with precision shots. Ground swarms were pushed back with brutal tactics. The Karnax, used to panic and retreat, now faced walls of fire and steel. They attacked from all directions, only to be met with silent coordination and fierce resistance. Each human death was met with fury. Each retreat became a trap. Slowly, the swarm began to learn that these new enemies were different. They didn't just fight to live. They fought because others couldn't. From her command seat aboard the Resolute Honor, Admiral Voss watched the reports flood in. Losses were taken, but ground was held. Her voice echoed through the command channels, steady and cold as iron. No step back. Every inch we hold saves a life. In the field, her orders became survival. Her leadership became legend. As night fell on Telisar, the stars above seemed closer. The planet was still bleeding, still under threat, but something had changed. The Karnax, once unstoppable, now hesitated. The Valari, once hopeless, now believed. And the humans, standing between both, proved that their world may have been cruel, but it had taught them how to endure. Telisar was no longer alone. Humanity had come, and their arrival was not the end. It was the beginning of resistance. Darkness came without warning as the skies of Telisar turned black with the return of the Karnax. Their hive ships fell like burning meteors, cracking the atmosphere with unnatural speed. The ground shook as thousands of biomechanical creatures poured out from the twisted hulls, their shapes shifting, crawling, and tearing through anything in their path. Their advance was not just fast, it was endless. a flood of steel, claws, and living machines that twisted across the land. For the Volari, it felt like the end. Their cities had barely begun to recover, and now the storm had returned, stronger and angrier. Cries of fear echoed through hollow towers as the people braced for extinction once again. But this time, there were humans standing in the way. From behind layered defenses built with brutal efficiency, Earth soldiers prepared to hold their ground. They did not scream, they did not waver. They just locked eyes on the coming tide and stood firm. Admiral Rhea Voss watched the incoming wave from the orbiting command ship, Resolute Honor. She knew this was no ordinary push, it was a full-scale retaliation. The Karnax had underestimated the humans once, but now they aimed to crush the resistance before it became something larger. She gave no speeches, she gave one order. Activate Project Thor. High above the planet, hidden deep within the Terran arsenal, orbital launch platforms opened their steel mouths. Long rods of tungsten, kinetic weapons with no explosives, only velocity, were released from low orbit. They fell silently, glowing hot as they sliced through the atmosphere. When they hit, the impact alone turned Karnax hives into flaming craters. The ground trembled with each strike. Massive enemies vanished beneath the rain of fire and metal. But still, the swarm pressed on. On the front lines, human forces fought side by side with the few brave Volari who stayed. One of them was Nialu, a scholar not made for war yet driven by the need to protect his people. His mind was sharp, trained in ancient science and biology, and he believed that understanding the enemy was the key to defeating it. Assigned to work with him was Sergeant Malik Rowe, a human tech specialist known for breaking systems and rewriting them mid-battle. Their partnership began with confusion, but soon grew into trust. Malik was direct, stubborn, and full of strange Earth sayings. Nialu was thoughtful, patient, and deeply curious. Together, they studied dead Karnax bodies, dissecting their odd blend of machine and organic matter, searching for weaknesses. In their quiet talks between alarms, Nialu learned about Earth, not the dangerous world told in alien tales, but the stories of survival, sacrifice, and strength that shaped humanity. He learned of cities built on the edges of volcanoes, people who grew food in deserts, and a history of never giving up, no matter how dark the odds. As the battle dragged on, casualties mounted. Human squads were being pushed to the limit. Medics ran out of supplies. Soldiers fought even when wounded. But something changed in the way they fought. It wasn't just defense, it was teaching. Engineers shared bunker designs with Volari. Survivors. Soldiers trained them in basic defense tactics. Pilots let Volari youth watch flight controls explaining strategy between strikes. The humans were not just holding the line for now. They were preparing the Volari to stand on their own. Malik and Nialu's research finally showed results. A chemical flaw in the Karnax biocircuitry could be triggered with focused energy, pulses. It was small but enough to interrupt their hive link for a few minutes. Those minutes meant survival. Admiral Voss deployed special units with modified weapons, and soon, Karnax units began falling out of sync during attacks. For the first time, the swarm showed signs of confusion. Even with progress, victory was still far. The swarm kept coming, but across the planet, hope grew. The Volari began to rise, not just as survivors but as learners. They saw humanity not as destroyers, but as protectors who shared pain and knowledge in equal measure. And as another wave loomed on the horizon, Sergeant Malik looked at Nialu and said, "We're not just fighting back. We're showing them how." Nialu nodded, understanding now what made these humans so feared and so respected. They were not unbreakable because they were strong. They were strong because they had been broken and had risen again. In a quiet lab beneath the battered city of Yelvain, deep inside one of the last Volari strongholds, a breakthrough finally came. Nialu and Sergeant Malik Rowe stood side by side, their faces lit by the soft blue glow of data screens, surrounded by fragments of Karnax remains and carefully drawn diagrams. Weeks of research, risk, and field testing had led them to something the Karnax had never expected: a flaw. By combining Valari biological understanding with human pattern analysis, they discovered a weakness buried deep within the Karnak's hive link, a neural signal that bound the swarm together like a living net. It couldn't be destroyed, but it could be broken, jammed just long enough to turn unity into confusion. The only problem was the range. The disruptor had to be placed at the heart of the Karnak's network, inside a giant command structure known as the core spire, where the swarm's signal was strongest. It was a place wrapped in heat, poison, and hundreds of enemies, a place no one had returned from alive. But they had no choice. If the swarm lost its link, even for minutes, the tide of war could shift. The time to defend was over. Now they had to strike. Admiral Rhea Voss gathered her top soldiers and the bravest Valari scouts. No one was ordered to go. Only volunteers stepped forward. The team included close combat experts, hackers, heavy weapons carriers, and a few Valari who had once studied the inner structures of their enemy before their cities fell. Nialu, quiet but determined, asked to join. Malik tried to stop him, but the scholar simply said, "This is my fight too." As the group prepared to board a stealth transport, Rhea looked at them all and gave her final words. "Make it hurt." It was not a battle cry. It was a promise to the enemy. The transport flew low, weaving through ash-filled skies, slipping under Karnak's radar. When the team landed miles away from the core spire, the real battle began. Acid storms rolled across the wastelands, burning through armor. The ground itself was unstable, cracked with glowing veins of bioenergy. As they moved, strange creatures rose from the mud, part metal, part insect, all deadly. The commandos fought with silent precision, covering each other, dragging the wounded, pushing forward inch by inch. The Valari, unused to war, were shocked at the human resolve. They saw soldiers press on with broken arms, laugh in the face of danger, and move not for medals, but for each other. They had heard stories of Earth's chaos, but now they saw its heart, grit, unity, and fire. The core spire towered like a jagged mountain of steel and bone, pulsing with red light. Inside, the swarm felt the intruders and sent wave after wave to stop them. The narrow halls echoed with the sound of gunfire, electric bursts, and roaring commands. Malik carried the disruptor on his back, guiding the team toward the signal center with Nialu beside him, translating the alien paths. Every corner was a trap. Every chamber was guarded. They lost teammates, but never stopped. In the final chamber, with barely minutes left, Malik activated the jammer. It pulsed with light and sound, reaching out like a silent scream into the swarm's mind. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the walls shook. Outside, across the battlefield, the Karnaks began to fall apart. Groups lost their link, froze in confusion, turned on each other by accident. The terrifying order of the swarm shattered like glass. The humans on the front lines saw it first, Karnak's units moving without purpose, attacking slower, losing coordination. For the first time in centuries, the swarm did not advance. They retreated. The team inside the spire had little time to escape. Alarms echoed everywhere. With Malik wounded and the path collapsing, it was Nialu who carried him. A Valari carrying. A human running through the fire became the image passed across every screen in the Terran fleet. They made it out moments before the core spire cracked from within and exploded in a burst of energy. Back at base, as wounded were carried in and cheers echoed through the halls, Admiral Voss stood silent, watching the retreating dots on the battle map. She knew this was not the end of the war. But it was something the galaxy had never seen before. A turning point. One sparked not by weapons alone, but by minds, unity, and the choice to fight for those who couldn't. And for the first time, the Karnaks had tasted fear. The fires that once covered Telisar slowly faded into smoke, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the skies began to clear. The ground still bore scars, burnt forests, shattered cities, broken monuments, but beneath the damage, life stirred again. The Valari, shaken yet not broken, emerged from hiding to rebuild their home. Their songs, once filled with sorrow, now carried notes of hope. The Karnak swarm had retreated into the dark corners of space, their perfect order disrupted, their grip finally loosened. Across Telisar's battered surface, human engineers worked beside Valari healers. Soldiers shared food with children. Medics repaired homes as well as wounds. For every machine left behind, there was a story, and for every act of protection, a bond had grown. The Valari leaders gathered in what remained of their High Council Hall to offer humanity their highest honor, the title of Eternal Guardians. But when the message reached Admiral Riavos aboard the Resolute Honor, she responded with calm resolve. "We're not here to rule," she said, her voice carried across 100 screens. "We're here to remind the galaxy, you are not alone, and you don't have to bow." The Terran fleet, after ensuring Telisar's defenses were strong, began its departure. But they did not leave empty spaces. They left behind advanced defensive systems, emergency shelters, medical outposts, and a small team of advisors trained, not only in technology but in cooperation. These humans were not conquerors, they were mentors, guides, and protectors. As the great ships lifted off into the sky, Valari across the planet looked up and whispered words that would be passed down through generations, not as cries for help, but as promises of strength. The humans, the so-called Deathworlders, had done something no empire, no alliance, no legend had done before. They had answered a cry for help, not with demands, but with courage. And when victory came, they simply turned back to the stars. Back on Earth, the original distress signal from Telisar was stored in the great archives beneath the Unity Dome. It was not kept as a record of war, but as a memory of something greater, the moment when humanity stood for someone else. Scientists, historians, and diplomats studied it not to prepare for more battles but to understand what had begun. New alliances were being formed. Across the galaxy, other species who had once feared humans now sent messages, not of warnings, but of welcome. The image of a Valari scholar carrying a wounded human soldier from the fire became a symbol of the new era. It was painted on station walls, printed on learning tablets, even displayed in crystal form at the edge of the Milky Way's central hub. No one saw it as propaganda. They saw it as truth. In quiet corners of space where small civilizations lived in fear of larger powers, the story of Telisar reached them like a spark in the night. It was told in many ways, in different tongues, but the meaning was always the same. The humans came not to take, not to destroy, but to protect. And they fought like no one else. From the death world of Earth had risen a people who refused to let fear rule the stars. They had learned to survive everything their planet threw at them, and now they were using that strength for others. On board the Resolute Honor, as the ship moved through the cold stretch between stars, Admiral Voss stood once again at the viewing deck. Around her, lights blinked quietly, engines hummed, and the stars seemed just a little closer. Sergeant Malik Rowe was recovering. Nialu was continuing his studies with Earth science teams, and the rest of the fleet was already preparing for the next unknown. Voss didn't speak much, but those who served with her said she always paused, to watch the stars before jumping to the next system. She didn't watch for danger. She watched for the next voice in the dark. The message from despair had done more than call for help. It had started a movement, a shift, a legend. The Deathworlders had arrived not to conquer, not to rule, but to stand beside the weak, to fight against the impossible, and to remind the stars of something ancient and powerful: hope. And in every corner of space where fear still lingered, one name began to echo louder than ever before: humanity.